After almost making one of the best predictions maybe on any podcast anywhere, in his first appearance, we've got Mike Black of Ducks and Dawgs back on the show today, talking all things Oregon football and beyond. Here we go.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin, D1 play-by-play broadcaster, lifelong Oregon Ducks fan. Thank you for making this your first listen or your first view if you're watching on YouTube every day. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks every single weekday. Like and subscribe if you're watching or listening to the show and you have not already. If you want to leave a 5-star review, drop a nice comment. Always appreciate that. Makes my day to see that sort of stuff and know that you, the wonderful fans of Mighty Oregon, are enjoying the show. And I have got a guest back on today, Mike Black, co-host of the Ducks and Dawgs podcast, who on his inaugural appearance here on the show was that close. I mean, that close to one of the most legendary predictions coming true of all time. I mean, Mike, it was, you called it. You said they're going to lose the Oregon basketball would lose to Arizona State and they would beat Arizona. They were right there at the end. But regardless, it's great to have you back on the show.
A bad shot selection away from the pick. Like if we hit that shot, we still don't win. Why are you pulling that?
Yeah, it's we don't need to go back down into that rabbit hole today. We're keeping it mostly football on today's show. So I wanted your thoughts on a couple of things I've been talking about on the pod recently because you're a very opinionated guy. That's why we like bringing you back on the show. We like opinions, whether you agree with mine or not. I think when you look at the quarterback situation for Oregon, it's interesting. And first of all, the last 15 years of Oregon quarterback play have been as good as really any team in the country. When you look at it, going back to Masoli and Thomas and Mariota and Herbert, there have just been a lot of guys to come through and play at a high level relative to the rest of the landscape in college football. But then you look at guys like Stetson Bennett or Nick Marshall for Auburn or Cardell Jones was a third stringer, and all those guys made national championship games. And we'll talk about Nico and the 5-star quarterback recruit, and I'll ask you about him. But isn't it kind of true that if Oregon can put the right pieces around a quarterback who's maybe not a Heisman caliber level player, they could win a national championship that way? I mean, it doesn't have to be the Mariota Joe Burrow approach, right?
I mean, sure, it's possible. Georgia just did it. But to do that, you're going to need 9 5-stars on defense. Isn't that what Georgia had right there? In modern foot, there's a reason Nick Saban used to not have those quarterbacks. Now he never doesn't have one. There's a reason for that. The game has changed. Cardell Jones is not winning a national championship in 2021. He's not going to. Not when he's facing
on that Ohio State team, he would have won.
No, when you're facing against the quarterback, because he was facing against Alabama. Alabama didn't have a quarterback either.
Yeah, the quarterback was Blake Sims, right?
Exactly. You think he would have won against Tua in college or against Bryce Young? Hell no.
Yeah, I see what you're saying there, but Alabama also pretty recently has won at a high level. I mean, they've always won with mostly mediocre quarterback play, and Tua was really good in college, and Bryce Young is really good, but though Mac Jones put up really good numbers, is he really that special of a player? I would say he's not.
He's probably top 20 in the world for playing quarterback.
I mean, in the NFL he's okay, but he doesn't have a huge arm. He doesn't have miraculous physical gifts or anything like that. He is an effective quarterback, but to say that he was, some big 5-star recruit like Bryce Young or Tua or, ended up being a player as good as Mariota or Herbert or Joe Burrow, Justin Fields, those sorts of guys. I think he's a solid step, not a big step, but a solid step below those sorts of guys, and he was able to win it all.
Well, if he was a solid step below, I don't think he would have been a Heisman finalist.
Yeah, when you're at Alabama and you have Devontae Smith catching bubble screens going for 50 yards, it helps, does it not?
Well, the other bad quarterbacks Bama used to run weren't in the Heisman finalist conversation. It was always the running backs or whatever player who was in the Heisman conversation. If you look at the past few years of recently, you think of all the quarterbacks Bama's had, they're all playing and starting in the NFL. Tua's starting in the NFL. Mac Jones is starting in the NFL. Jalen Hurts is starting in the NFL. Does anybody doubt Bryce Young is going to start in the NFL?
No.
So that means he's had top 32 quarterbacks in the world since what, 2016?
Yeah, that's true. I think that Saban has done a remarkable job of pivoting because he's a defensive coach, right? But he saw the way the rules have changed and schemes just are always evolving, getting smarter. Offenses are just too good. The best athletes are going to play offense most often. That's definitely where they're at. I think that you still could do it. You would have to recruit at a very high level the way Georgia did. But if Stetson Bennett can win you a national championship in 2022, that's, I think, indicative of the fact that it's not a requirement, right? It helps.
Yes.
A lot of the teams will have that. But I think in the past you would have said, boy, it seems like you kind of have to have that if you're a team like Oregon. But with the way that this staff is built out and their potential recruiting prowess, I don't think it's like that anymore.
I think we might have to agree to disagree on this one because I think there's only 3 teams who can win without a really good quarterback, and that's Ohio State, Georgia, and Alabama. Because there's such a big gap between those 3 and everybody else in recruiting. As good as Oregon's done, there's still a massive gap between us and those 3 when it comes to recruiting rankings, blue chip ratio, talent composite, like whatever you want to put, there's a huge gap between where we're at and where they're at. So just because, Ohio State was able to do it and Georgia was able to do it, do I think Oregon can win with a mid-tier to mid-low tier quarterback? No. I don't think a miracle would win it with a quarterback like that at Oregon. I only think 3 schools can do that.
Well, we'll see if Oregon can get themselves into that sort of caliber. But you're right that you have to be able to recruit at an extremely high level, though the staff appears kind of poised to do that. We'll keep going with Mike Black. March Madness, though, only a few weeks away. I don't know about you, Mike, but I'm stoked for the tournament. It's my favorite time of the year. And that means you need to start thinking now about where you're going to run your brackets this year. Are you going for the usual or are you going for the best? We've done our homework. We're running our brackets with runyourpool.com. Along with standard brackets, Run Your Pool offers game types like Survivor or Pick X, both of which are really fun. They have options to edit scoring, more intel than you can even find at ESPN or CBS. We believe in Run Your Pool because, like I said, we're running our brackets there ourselves. There's no truer test than that. If you want to play against us at Locked On for a shot at a cash prize, join us at runyourpool.com/lockedon. While you're there, create your own pool for your friends and family. Enter Pure Badness. Great code right there at checkout for $10 off your custom pool. That's runyourpool.com/lockedon for your chance to win a cash prize. And if you're looking for a good, healthy, and productive snack to nibble on during March Madness this year, look no further than Built Bar, which makes it easier to stick to your New Year's resolutions. If you haven't tried the Puffs, the first ever protein-infused marshmallow, you are missing out in a big, big way. Covered in 100% real chocolate. There's some incredible flavors, including cinnamon-y churro. I practice that before I come on the show. Coconut marshmallow, banana cream pie. They're so good. There's a bunch. Mint brownie is my favorite, as those of you returning listeners know. 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, 17 grams of protein. Compare that to a candy bar that, shall we say, is just a lot worse, but it tastes just as good, if not better. Go to Built.com, use promo code LOCK15, get 15% off your order. Promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at Built.com. So, back to the Oregon quarterback discussion. And speaking of the signal caller, there is a 5-star recruit that Oregon is going after in the class of 2023, Nico Iamaleava. We believe that's how he pronounces his name. As Mike told me before we came on the show, we're just going to call him Nico. It's a little bit easier that way. That way we don't sound quite as bad. But this is a guy who's got all the physical tools. I did a breakdown of his high school tape a couple episodes ago. You can go back and listen to that if you want. But if the Ducks are able to land a guy like that, what does it say about where this staff is at in terms of recruiting and, really propelling the Oregon brand forward on the recruiting trail?
Yeah, I actually made a tweet kind of similar to that earlier. It's like, this is the first time I can recall, but Oregon is in the running for 3 of the top 5 players on 247's top 247. That's insane. And, I think most realistic fans, when Mario first left, expected there to be a drop-off in recruiting. Like, realistically, I think we all expected, no matter how drastic you thought it might have been or might not have been, I think everyone expected, some sort of drop-off, but it doesn't even seem like there will be. There might even be a slight escalation from what we were seeing. And Nico is an absolute baller. He is insane. I think in this class, I would have him as personally the second best quarterback behind Malachi Nelson. I would have
You put him over Arch Manning?
Yes, I would put him over Arch. I have Arch third, I think, when the last time I looked over everything. But yeah, I'd have Nico over Arch right behind Malachi. And he's really talented. It's going to be a great add. The only concern for Oregon is going to be if Alabama does not win the Manning sweepstakes, they are going to be all in on Nico. And when Alabama comes calling, it's not easy to keep players. Ask Bryce Young, who Oregon was also trying to get.
Yeah, and I think that's just something that Oregon has to be prepared for, right? Because if we want to recruit at a high level, we have to be prepared that, you know, the Clemsons, the Alabamas, the Georgias of the world are going to be going after the same sort of guys. But he's got, you know, what I like most about his tape is, I mean, the size stands out because he's going up against a lot of high school kids, and I get that. But I watch his throwing motion. It looks really easy to me, very natural. You know, like I think Ty Thompson has a good arm when you watch him. You can see he has a good arm. But to me, his motion is a little more Darren Thomas-like with a bigger windup. Nico, he's just back there kind of slinging it. You know, he's just got that flick of the wrist, that sort of easy way for the game to come to him. And it'll obviously be an adjustment when he gets to college. But from a physical standpoint, he's a highly rated 5-star quarterback for a reason.
Yeah, but if you're talking like, you know, the motions and their form and everything, I actually don't believe too much in the form. And if you look at it, if you go by the technical, like how you're supposed to throw football, if you look at it, Nico has terrible form. But I think if you throw the football how you're supposed to throw it and it feels right to you and you're able to make the plays, I don't think it really matters how it comes out of your hand. You know, players can play. I was at a event here in Lakeland where, coincidentally, Mario Cristobal was the guest speaker, and he said great players make great coaches. So that's what Dan Lanning and that's what the staff's going to need to do. They're going to need to bring in some great players, and, you know, they're going to have to coach them as well. But the players are going to make you what you are in the coaching industry. If you're a great coach with bad players, you're going to get fired. If you're a bad coach with great players, you're going to stick around longer than you should, Mark Helfrich. And it's just it's all dependent on the guys you got around you. So I'm glad to see that we're recruiting really well, especially at the quarterback position. We had been able to recruit quarterbacks, but they hadn't panned out lately.
Yeah, I think developing a quarterback is one of the changes Duck fans are kind of looking for with this new administration, right? Because the development has not been, shall we say, as pristine as we would perhaps like it to be as fans of the Ducks. But you want to recruit great players, bring them in as often as you can, but sometimes because of playing time and such, they end up leaving. Jaylin Davies entered the transfer portal. What did you make of him leaving the room? Once I kind of looked at it, it wasn't all that surprising. He didn't play a lot, and I think our DB room has quietly become not only deep but also really talented.
Yeah, he played really well when he did play in the Alamo Bowl game.
Yes.
I think he had 3 tackles there. But as much as, you know, this is a bad part of the industry and of college football, I kind of don't think he left by choice, because we're three over the scholarship limit. We have a lot more players on the roster on scholarship at DB than most positions. There was bound to be someone leaving that room somewhere. And when you're over the limit, it's the bad part of the business, but you got to push guys out. It's how the rules work. It's what you have to do. It's a part of the job. And I think he's going to be great. He's going to develop into a really good player somewhere else. It's just probably not going to be Oregon.
Yeah, well, you know, unless the staff pulls another 7 McGee rabbit out of the hat or Sean Dollars, and they're in the portal, they're out of the portal, and who knows how all that goes down. And though we're talking football is over the season. Basketball, full steam for both pro and college hoops. March Madness right around the corner. From all the latest odds, totals, player performance props to where the next fired coach is going to land, BetOnline.net is the #1 spot for all your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. It's not just basketball. BetOnline.net, your source for hockey, boxing, UFC, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. So, speaking of the transfer portal, the big shakeups this offseason have been the introduction of NIL, and Oregon actually just announced, we saw before we came on the show, they're kind of setting up an institution with or at the university. The tweet from @GoDucks is the University of Oregon is excited to announce the first licensed school marketplace in college sports, which will support UO student athletes in maximizing name, image, and likeness opportunities. Just first of all, Mike, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so my guess is it's going to be like a jerseys with names on it, signed pictures, signed balls, memorabilia, stuff like that is going to be out of there, and I'm assuming a majority of the profits would end up going to the players. Yeah, I think it's really cool. I love that NIL is a thing. These players have been earning millions upon millions of dollars for these schools and not seeing a dime of it. I actually wrote one of my big college papers on it in 2015, 2016. And I had it peer reviewed and stuff like that. And it's something I've been pushing for myself. I had called my local officials and stuff about it because it was something that I, really believed in. And I'm glad to see it finally being there. And I'm glad to see the NCAA stripped of their power.
Do you think NIL, the impact of it is overblown a touch in terms of how it will kind of shape the college football recruiting landscape? Because when I look at it, I see schools as, being able to do something like what Oregon just announced or get some deals for kids or, a tiny, tiny minority are going to have the multi-million-dollar deals. But it's the big brands were already getting the big time recruits, right? And we all know that, you don't know exactly where or who, but a lot of guys were getting paid under the table before. Now it'll just kind of be brought into the light. I mean, do you think it'll really change that much?
Yes, because when you're in recruiting, these guys, when they're down to these 5 schools, like it's not like most of the time they don't know which school they want to go to and they pick last second. Like I've been around kids who've committed to big schools who had big offers and they didn't know until like hours before or even the hour of where they were going because it's actually this, they have the relationship with this staff. They also really like this staff and these players on this team and this team. And, it comes down to that. So when it's that close, what is it going to come down to? Well, who can I make the most money with?
Well, it's going to be a consideration, but when your coach is going on the trail, if you're going to make honest pitches about, NIL deals and the earning potential for guys if they come to your school, my takeaway is that's only really going to impact the top high-end recruits. So it'll play a factor there, but when you look at a recruiting class writ large, I mean, most college athletes are not going to have NIL deals unless they become really, established players, right? Because companies are not going to put dollars behind a guy who's playing just a handful of snaps a game.
Well, Miami's boosters have already disproved that. So have Texas's. There are guys who aren't playing who are getting tens of thousands from these boosters just because they play for the school that this really rich guy really loves. And when it comes down to it, even if it's not a big NIL deal, if you're that tied up between 2 schools and this school's willing to pay you $3,000, this school's willing to pay you $1,000, and you're that close, like you couldn't decide, well, I get $2,000 more here, I'm going here. It might not be on as big a scale as some of these NIL deals we're talking about, but the small NIL deals, whether it seems like nothing to us or not, go back to when you were 17, 18. An extra, what would you have done with $2,000 coming right out of high school?
What would I have done with it?
You would have been
gone with a friend to play Pebble Beach.
So yeah, $2,000. You're like, hell yeah, I got money. You're ready to go. So those small NIL deals are going to matter. And yes, they're not going to be getting the huge, they're not going to be getting the Nike collaborations. They're not going to be getting the Beats sponsorship. But Joe Schmo car dealership or mattress firm or whatever the hell is going to hand out these small ones because what do people really enjoy, especially in these small towns? College football. They want their team to be good. They want the bragging rights. They want this player to come play for their team. So as small as it may seem in the grand scheme of things with all these deals like Bryce Young and Spencer Rattler and guys like that are getting, that's still going to matter. Because these kids have never had any sort of money. And now, whether it's $3,000, that's still a lot for a kid just coming out of high school who may not have had anything growing up.
Yeah, but the other side of it is my computer's glitching out right now. Can you still hear me, Mike?
Everything looks fine.
Okay, well, I'm just going to proceed as if everything is normal. The schools that are going to be able to hand out those sorts of deals were already the big ones, right? It's the schools that have the most money. So while it may play in on a large or on in a large way for a couple guys who are down to a few schools, I guess my point about it not having a huge impact is who gets the top players or where the big time recruits end up going. That's not going to change in a radical way, in my view.
Not for the first few years, but I have one example I can give you. If I asked you before this class even started getting put together, what's the state of Stanford's program? Right before NIL was enacted, you would have been like, they're in the gutter. They're not doing very well, and they don't look like they're going to be doing well. Well, all of a sudden, one of the richest schools in the world, right as NIL opens up, is a top 10 recruiting class. No coaching changes. There's been no major changes at Stanford. There's been no AD change, no president change. Just one of the richest schools in the world was allowed to give players money.
I mean,
if the Ivy Leagues get involved in sports and are willing to spend money, as much as I love Oregon or as much as Joe Smo loves Alabama, if the Ivies ever wanted to seriously get involved, we're all done for. We're not winning. There's a reason back when they took it serious, Harvard and Yale were winning every title. There was a reason for that.
Well, they also started college football and didn't have as much competition back in the day.
For sure, and they were the only ones investing in it.
Yeah, that's true. It's about investment. All of that, though, I think is good news for Oregon fans because
I don't think it's necessarily
we've still got Phil Knight hanging around the program. He wants to win a national championship, and the Oregon athletics department as a whole has never been short on cash. So I stand by what I said, that it's not changing the landscape radically, but for those handful of guys, it might have an impact. Chase Cota coming to the Ducks. South Medford guy, was at UCLA. Never really quite popped. He was behind a couple other receiving targets there. I think it was such a logical addition, not just because his dad played for the Ducks, but also because he's a veteran in a young and relatively unproven receiver room, can kind of be a stabilizing force in there for those young guys who are just starting to see the field and realize their full potential. What do you think about the addition of Chase Cota, and how much could he help the Ducks?
Yeah, I think it was really necessary. It's crazy how much a position room can change in just a few months. Before Mario had left, you would think, oh, we have too many wide receivers. Why are we recruiting 6 of them? Now it's like, okay, we have no wide receivers and we landed no wide receivers. What's going on here? And yeah, Cota, if you were going to land anybody, you needed somebody who could produce now. Devin Williams left early. He said that he had issues with his family. His mom died. He had a kid. He has to go make money. You have both of the Johnson and Red, and they're gone. But you have Micah, went to Florida State. So you lost almost all of your production, and you didn't really bring anybody in the recruiting class. So you either had to go get Coing or Cota, and Cota made the most sense. He's got that heritage with the Ducks, and he's a Power 5 player. It's going to be hopefully a seamless transition. It was a necessary add. I think he probably ends up probably wide receiver 3, but he's going to be that veteran presence in the locker room. He might fall below that with some of the talent in the room, but what's going to go underrated is how much he's going to have an effect on those younger guys in the room.
Yeah, 100%. And Justice Lowe, I believe, is projected to play wide receiver for the Ducks, but you're right that he's really the only guy at that position Oregon added in this recruiting class. And we talk so much about recruiting, and when you look at this Oregon receiver room, because we haven't seen a lot of the guys, I think right now the widespread belief amongst Duck fans is, are they really that good? And they haven't proven a lot and all this sort of stuff. But when you go back and look at all of these guys, Troy Franklin and Dante Thornton and Chris Hudson, they were 4-star recruits. Franklin, I think, was the highest of the bunch. Might have been Thornton, like really highly rated 4 stars. So the potential is definitely there. And having a guy like Chase Cota, who, even if he is wide receiver 3 or wide receiver 4, to me, that would mean that those guys with probably slightly higher ceilings are getting close to that benchmark.
Yeah. And, just to touch on what you were talking about, there's been a recent trend with Oregon fans. Young players can't play because they haven't played before. We saw that with, before we knew who was going to be the quarterback last year. Oh, well, it should be Brown because he's played before. Oh, right now with the wide receivers, we don't have anybody who's played before. With the DB, whenever we bring in talented players, as good as Drew Mathis was, there was zero reason for him to be starting over Flo game 1. As good as he was and as much as he's done for Oregon, he's been great for us. There's zero reason. It's just, they don't want to play young players. And if you never play the young players because you want someone who's experienced, you're never going to play your best players. They're just going to sit there and they're not going to be used. There's a reason Alabama's playing new wide receivers every year. There's a reason Georgia's got new running backs every year, because they're letting the young guys play and they're going on making a bunch of money to play the game they love. You can't just keep going back to, hey, we need whoever's got the most snaps. It's not going to work.
Yeah, I was going to say in there, I'm glad you added it at the end, because I was going to jump in and say, well, I think Alabama's always throwing to new guys and Georgia's handing it off to new guys, because the guys they were giving the ball to before are now playing on Sundays all over the place in the league. Speaking of the NFL, Kayvon Thibodeaux has been kind of a consensus #1 overall pick, and then Aiden Hutchinson came into the mix, and Thibodeaux was falling, and then there were reports that GMs weren't crazy about his work ethic or his drive and all that sort of stuff. And that could mean good news for Thibodeaux if he ends up going to a team that has got a better chance to compete right away rather than a total rebuild like Penei Sewell going to the Bengals. But what do you make of Thibodeaux as a pro prospect? And, this sort of overthinking is what I see it as, of the potential for him to fall, out of the top 5 picks.
Yeah, this is not just Oregon exclusive, and it's not just a trend for Oregon. But I mean, if you look recently, Oregon's had this happen to a few players. Penei Sewell was good for 3+ years, and they're like, oh, maybe he's going to slip. We don't know. Is he really that good? Justin Herbert was considered one of the better quarterbacks for like NFL prospect wise for dang near 4 years, and they're like, oh, I don't know. Is he really that good? Then he slipped. Javon Holland was looked at as a first-round safety for the last 2 years, maybe right before the draft. It's like, oh, I don't know. Is he really that good? We didn't even know if he would go in the second round until draft day happened. And, the same thing's happening with Kayvon. He's not going to fall as far, but they're like, oh, I don't know. We've been hearing about him for 3 years. Is he really that good? It happens with a lot of players. It's happening with Drake London right now. It's happened with a whole bunch of guys. There were people who tried to talk themselves out of Joe Burrow. And it's overthinking it. It's going to happen with players. It's when we're talking about the sport for 365 days for the same player for 4 years, everyone's eventually going to be a little stale on it and be like, oh, well, I don't know. We went back and watched his tape for the 875th time, and his toe was pointing that way.
I think it's really easy to just overthink these guys when they've been heralded as top prospects for so long, right? Because we live in we live in the age of information where you can always get new stuff. We always want, what's next, what's new, what's fresh, what's the next big thing, not someone who is just going to be good. I mean, I saw this a lot with Justin Fields when he came out of the draft. It's crazy to me that Justin Fields fell out of the top 10. That is absolutely insane. A guy who got his team to the college football playoff, then to the national championship, showed his capabilities as a leader, had all the physical tools imaginable, and he fell to the Bears at, what was it, 12th, 13th in the draft? I mean, that was so wild to me, and I think that when these guys are so good for so long, and we know that they're going to project as pros, we tend to just want to overanalyze, like you were saying. You watch film 500 times. Oh, well, maybe it's this. And you just kind of forget and take everything else that they do for granted. And I like that you brought up Javon Holland, because he's been a stud with the Dolphins. And anyone who watched him in college knew he was going to be really good and was a first-round caliber safety. And instead he fell to the second, but that's to the benefit of the Dolphins.
Yeah, and it can happen both ways too. As much as he did good things for Oregon as well, they overthought into picking Akili way too high. Akili Smith was, had a good year. They overthought that year, got picked too high. It happens. You get picked high or low based off of some little thing that they think way too much into. And it's just, it's the name of the game when especially with these scouts. These scouts are literally looking at these guys 365. Actually, they're probably looking at them 50 weeks out of the year, at least 5 days a week, pretty much looking at the same group of guys. They're gonna, it's so much of the same thing. You're gonna overthink it. You're like, well, wait, when you leave your house, did I lock my door?
Yeah.
Do I have my wallet? Like something you do a million times, you're gonna overthink it because, it's like, wait, pause, what's going on. And it's going to happen. It happens all the time. Like, I don't know how Lamar Jackson dang near fell out of the first round. He played bad talent. Well, he played with bad talent too. He was going insane. Like, this stuff makes no sense. It's just overthinking. You know, if a guy can ball, they can ball.
It happens literally every year, which is amazing because it's the National Football League and these guys are pros. They're paid a lot of money to get it right. But I think it's just a testament to how to show how hard it really is to hit on a draft pick. Last thing here with Mike Black of the Ducks and Dawgs podcast. If somehow Oregon basketball can get into the tournament, we're recording this before the Washington game. Who knows? You know, I mean, it's just hard to predict the effort level you're going to get, the intensity, whether or not the shots will fall. If somehow the Ducks finagle their way into the NCAA tournament, do you think they could win 2 or more games?
We'll see. It depends. We need to get a lower seeds so we can play good teams because that's the only way we'll play good. If we get a high seed and we're playing bad teams, we're not going to win a game. I came in here with a bold prediction last time. My co-host for the Ducks and Dawgs podcast, Matt, has a bold prediction for this time. He said Oregon could lose to one or both of Washington and Wazoo, then go on to win the Pac-12, and he would not be surprised. Which would be very fitting for this team. Would be very, very fitting for this team.
It would, and you know what? If they did that and won the Pac-12 tournament, more power to them, because that would be pretty thrilling, and we'll just have to we just take it a game at a time. It's been a roller coaster. There have been some lows, then some highs, back down to low. They've got a chance. They just have to finish it strong down the stretch. Mike Black, co-host of the Ducks and Dawgs podcast. Check him out on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Appreciate you coming back on, man. Won't be the last time you're on with me here on Locked On Ducks. Good to talk to you.
Likewise, man. Appreciate you for having me.
I appreciate everyone listening and watching. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.